Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about the unique units in Civ 3 and my opinions on them. So, first of all, the things I'm taking into consideration when I do these rankings. Just straight up, how much better is it to play with this game with access to the unique unit as opposed to access to no unique unit? Which might seem really intuitive, but some people do it like how much of an upgrade it is relative to the base unit. And I don't think that's fair, because a small upgrade to an already great unit is superior to a big upgrade to a bad unit. Other things that to take into account, I don't consider synergy with the Civ's traits. I don't consider the strength of the trait of the Civ that has the unique unit, and I don't consider Golden Ages. This is the last one's kind of contentious because Golden Ages are like a significant part of what a unique unit does. For people who don't know, if you win combat with your unique unit, you instantly get a Golden Age if you haven't had one already. The reason I don't consider this is because it has the effect of making things really murky and kind of inconsistent, because generally bad units, like, you're not going to use those bad unique units, so you have complete control over when you get your Golden Age. But if unique unit is really good, then you're pretty much forced to either not use that really good unit or to take the Golden Age at the time that you get the unit. So it makes bad units better and it makes good units worse. So I'd rather do like a pure analysis and not take that into consideration. So first we got the tier 6 units. These units are worse than the units they replace. You'd be better off to have no unique unit than to have these ones. So the worst unit, hands down in the game, is the Javelin Thrower. Worst unique unit, at least. Compare it to the Bowman. It has the same stat line, 221, as the Bowman, but it costs 10 shields more, which is a big deal early in the game. And the Bowman isn't even a crazy good unique unit. And the Bowman also has defensive bombard, which the Javelin Thrower does not have. The only reason the Javelin Thrower would be completely balanced if it would costed 20 shields. It's got the Enslave ability, which kind of makes up for the defensive bombard that the Bowman has. Those are two roughly equivalent, I'd say. So yeah, it could easily be 20 shields. I imagine the reason they didn't do that is because the Mayans have the strongest trait pairing in the game. They're agricultural and industrious. But of course, like I mentioned, I'm not considering trait pairs when I do these rankings. It's also the same cost as a swordsman, and it's significantly weaker than a swordsman. And the swordsman's not even a unique unit, so you might get a couple workers throughout the game from this unit. There's a specific strategy you can do where you farm workers by playing on Raging Barbarians, but it's just, the enslaved workers are half speed anyway, so I don't know, it's just not a very good unit. And I'd rather have the ability to build an archer, because if you play as the Mayans, then you can't do an archer rush, because you can't build archers. If you build javelin throwers instead, you're going to pay 10 more shields per unit. And I'd much rather have 15 archers than 10 javelin throwers. So next thing is the Chasqui Scout. This costs 20 shields, which is the same as the Chariot. It is admittedly more mobile than a Chariot in some terrain, especially mountains and hills. Chariots are wheeled units, so they can't go in jungles, marshes, or mountains unless they're following a road. But tell me, assume it was completely flat terrain, and you spawned with horses. Would you ever do a Chariot rush on somebody? No, because that's really, really silly. There are much better options that you have. You could just wait for horsemen. And so similarly, even if the terrain is bad, there have no reason to be rushing people with Chasqui Scouts. It's just not an effective tactic. And they're not a catastrophically awful unit, but one thing it means is that you are unable to build any more scouts after the first scout you build. And first of all, these things are more expensive than scouts. So if you want to pop some huts and maybe get some technologies, some free cities, that's not it's an option, but you're going to have to pay a lot more for it. They're also technically military units. So enemy civs will kick them out of their land, whereas scouts they can just let wander through their land. So you can do strategies you can map out the entire continent with your scout. You can't do that with a Chasqui Scout. And you can also deny resources. You just stand your scout on the resource, and they can never road that tile because they can't access the tile. So yeah, just because of that, it's not an awful unit, but I'd rather have the scout. So tier 5. These are usually better in some ways than the ones they replace. In some realistic situations, they may be worse than the unit they replace. But it's nice to have these as an option. But the one thing is that focusing on these units is a mistake. Like, for example, the Numidian mercenaries. They're a nice option to have, but if you like try to rush someone offensively with the Numidian mercenary as opposed to archers, then you will be worse off. So don't build your game strategy around these units. So the worst of these is the F-15. I had like more fond memories of the F-15 because of the future start scenario that we play in multiplayer, but I actually checked the game files for that, and it's edited so the F-15 and the jet fighter are better at bombing. In the base game, they're pretty awful at bombing. Even the F-15, which is like upgraded bombard. So it has 2 rate of fire and 6 bombard versus 3 rate of fire and 12 bombard of the regular bomber. So I'd say roughly that means your bomber will hit 3 times as hard, which is kind of ridiculous because this is supposed to be a unique unit. It has less range too. One thing you could arguably say you'd use this for is like you bomb your enemy and get rid of their fighters and jet fighters. Whereas if you use your bombers, then your bombers are just going to get intercepted and killed. But really, you could just bomb with the jet fighters first and then bomb with the bombers. That's a better idea than using F-15s. Like, you should still be building bombers if you are building F-15s. So it is a strict improvement on the base unit. So it's better than the previous 2 units, but yeah, I just can't imagine a strategy that would actually really make use of these because I can imagine the strategy, it would be pretty bad. The one thing is that, like, technically, if you were doing like a sweeping strategy where you try to clear out the interceptors first, and the interceptors didn't intercept, then your bombing runs that happen to make it through would be more effective because you have the F-15. But that's the only advantage, pretty much. It has lethal land bombardment. Like, I hope so. Otherwise, how would you get? It'd be really, really difficult to get a golden age. But really, who cares? Next is the Numidian mercenary, and I already touched on this. That don't use this offensively. This is a bad rushing unit. Just build archers and then like send a couple of Numidian mercenaries as escorts if you want to do a rush as Carthage. It's much worse than the Hoplite because it costs 10 more shields, and 10 more shields is a lot early game. It's barely better than the pikeman. It's just +1 offense relative to the pikeman. And yeah, like 3 defense is a luxury in the ancient era. You don't really need it for a lot of things. Spearmen will defend most of the places you need them to defend, and you'll be able to build more spearmen since they're cheaper than the Numidian mercenary. Yeah, so to repeat, do not use this as a main offensive unit. Conquistadors. These are super cool in theory. I wish they were more usable in the base game, but because of the era they come in, like, all the territory has been discovered and planted on, and yeah, you're probably going to be up against like pikemen at the very least, or else muskets. So these don't really do that much. Against the AI too, the AI have a human player will concentrate their defensive unit in the cities that are most likely to be attacked. The AI will distribute them pretty much evenly, with more focus on bigger cities. So against a human player, the Conquistador is good because you can like surprise their backline cities and take them. But yeah, it doesn't really work against the AI. So what's the point? They're like niche pillaging strategies you could use with these guys. Like if you load them up into an army, you can pillage like 9 tiles per turn or something like that. It's ridiculous. But I don't really like pillaging strategies very much because it makes the enemy weaker as opposed to making you stronger. In some cases, pillaging strategies will make both players stronger or both players weaker because you invest your resources into this. And when you take the city finally, which I hope you will do, you lose all those improvements. And then meanwhile, everyone else in the game is getting stronger while you're investing your resources and making someone else weaker. So I don't really like the Conquistador very much. The Keshik. So it's cheaper. Literally the only reason I don't give this a lower ranking. It is 60 shields, and the Knight is 70 shields. Compared to the Ansar Warrior, which comes with an extra movement point and the same attack and defense. It also requires iron, but resource requirements aren't a big deal. I'll just touch on this now. It's like a small thing that you can like trade away that resource if you need it, but if you really like don't have the resource you need to build your units, then you can just trade the AI for those resources. So yeah, it's a small perk, but I don't consider it too heavily. The developers really overestimated the value of mobility over hills and mountains. You can see that with the Chasqui Scout, where they thought it was like a big perk, but it's really, almost nothing. I'd say like it's about a tenth as valuable as an extra movement point, which is, pretty much speaks for itself, I think. Because like realistically, only like 20-15% of the tiles on the map will be hills or mountains that you don't have road access to. So you'd much rather have the extra movement point than the mobility over mountains and hills. Also, defense is fairly important on knights. Since by the Middle Ages, the AI will be counterattacking your attacking units. Like in the ancient era, you can kind of just like stroll into their cities and they won't really mount a counterattack, but it is important in the Middle Ages because they will counterattack you. You can kind of position yourself on mountains, but yeah, it's still, yeah. I'd say it's an upgrade on the knight, but yeah. 3-Man Chariot. This is pretty much a horseman with extra defense. Don't think of it like as a super buff chariot. Think of it as a horseman with extra defense. Which is, it's not the worst thing in the world. I don't know. Obviously, it's wheeled. Can't go in jungles, mountains, marshes without a road, etc. Yeah, it's not very useful. Defense isn't as important on a horseman. Like I mentioned, the whole point of a horseman is you just go in there really quickly and then you kill all their units, and so they don't have a chance to attack you. But it is a buff to the horseman, I guess. So yeah, it's better than the other units. The Cossack. This one might be a bit controversial, but I think people don't consider the fact that it costs 10 more shields than the regular cavalry. So cavalry is 80 shields, Cossack is 90, and the Sipahi is 100. So this is an upgrade, don't get me wrong. It has Blitz, meaning it can attack multiple times per turn, meaning more promotions, more military great leaders, but there's a lot of times where you'd rather have like 15% more cavalry. So in some situations, it can be worse theoretically than having access to the cavalry. I suspect one of the reasons it's so popular is that at lower difficulty levels, you can just like stomp the AI with these because they can attack over and over again, and you're fighting like really weak units like spearmen. But on higher difficulty levels, by the time you get cavalry, you're going to be against muskets or pikes. So a lot of the time, you're not going to be able to attack twice just because your unit is too damaged. Tier 4. These units are all improvement on the base unit in realistic situations. They either provide consistent utility and military help or are very strong in niche circumstances. So the first one of those is the Musketeer. Definitely a strict improvement. I don't know, like, it has defensive bombard, that's a plus, and it's modestly better at defending. But the time between cavalry and rifles is so small that you really should be fine without it. I guess if... yeah, I just don't value extra defense points on defensive units too much. And, I guess you'll use it to escort large stacks of your units, especially artillery, but, yeah. You'll get some use out of it, but not too much. The Impi. This is a strict improvement on the Spearman, and has really, I wouldn't say decent utility, it's even good utility. Basically your Spearmen can be in more places at once, so you don't need to build as many as them. It allows for niche military strategies. Sadly, those are mostly pillaging strategies, which I've already told you my feelings about. It's hands down the best unit in multiplayer, but those strategies aren't really useful against computers. The reason for that is multiplayer is 4v4, so any damage you do to the enemy team is making your chances of winning better, but in a free-for-all game, like a single-player game, then you can make yourself and the AI worse off by investing resources into pillaging them. So in multiplayer, there's also a phenomenon that's like simultaneous moves and turns. So at the end of your turn, you can move 2 tiles, and then the start of the next turn, you can move before the enemy has a chance to react. So you can threaten twice as many tiles with the Impi in multiplayer because of that double move ability, which makes pillaging really, really, really strong. You can effectively, if the enemy has 3 Impi just surrounding your civilization like vultures, you need, I'd say, about 15 units just to protect all your workers, all your roads, all your mines, and all your cities. So yeah, a lot of effectiveness in multiplayer. In single player, not the best. Man of War. England, I've seen people play that on Sid. It has a lot of uses there, but it's a really, really niche situation, so I can't give this a high ranking. But it is the best naval unit you'll get until almost even after the Ironclad, because it's just so mobile. And it can bombard, so at least like the Carrack can't bombard. I'm gonna rank the Carrack higher, but the Carrack can't bombard. So yeah, if there are no ships for you to kill, this is not really as useful. But this thing has a lot of other things that make it more useful. Basically, it can go in oceans in an era where no other unit can go in oceans. So you can get early contact with the other continent in a continent's map. It's useful for colonizing small islands in archipelago or archipelago. Sorry, I always mispronounce that word. Yeah, and it's also good for attacking other ships, but you can't bombard. So I'd say, as a net like situation, the Carrack is slightly better than Man of War, but neither of them are very good, except on archipelago maps. So the Hoplite. This might be controversially low, but I've already mentioned that I don't really value having 3 defense much in the Ancient Era. It's a luxury you just don't really need too much. You can't really, like, if anyone knows any strategies for baiting the AI to attacking your strong defensive units, then by all means, please tell me. But it hasn't been my experience that they do that. You can, like, escort your stacks with these, which is useful. Like, just send 2 or 3 with your stack of swordsmen or archers or whatever. And they at least provide utility in the medieval era because they're effectively like a cheaper pikeman. But yeah, they don't really do too much work in the Ancient Era, and so I can't really give this too high of a rating. Panzer, on the other hand, I really want to give this a higher mark because 3 movement on a tank is really, really cool. It works well with bombers, but you know what else works well with bombers? Cavalry and bombers. Like, it doesn't have blitz, but yeah, everything works well with bombers because bombers are just such an amazing unit. Yeah, and like a unit that comes this late, like a lot of games, I'd say about 2/3 of games will be decided by before the time you reach the late industrial era. Like, either you will have won or be in a position where it doesn't matter what you do, you'll still win, or you will have lost, or like pretty much be in that position where you're guaranteed to lose. So an improvement that late isn't really as significant. It is a strong improvement on the base unit, so I'll give it like kind of a high mark relative to the other stuff, but yeah, I wish this was more useful than it was. So the Swiss Mercenary. You might be wondering why I gave this a higher ranking than the Hoplite, and that's because I value defensive strength more in the medieval era, because the AI will actually be launching like solid attacks against you. Yeah. And obviously useful for escorting your stacks. Like I mentioned, the enemy has the infrastructure. Like, it has roads leading through its land, so it can move its army into your land before you make peace with them. Like in the ancient era, you can just attack them, and then before they can mobilize their army, you already make peace with them. And they'll also have boats, so they can land you with boats. So having defensive units more useful in the medieval era. So I'm going to give this a higher ranking than the Hoplite. Tier 3. These are great unique units. They either provide a ton of utility or help significantly when conquering your enemies, and some are extremely overpowered in niche situations. So the first is the Jaguar Warrior. I had these much higher up, like 7th or 8th place or something, when I first made this list, but I realized a lot of the value of this unit comes from the traits that the Aztecs have. So they're agricultural, so they can grow behind like the rushing strategies they use with this unit, and they're militaristic, so they can build cheap barracks to really exploit that early on. So yeah, like I said, I'm not going to take trait synergy into account, and on paper, this unit isn't quite as good as the Aztecs are. But compared to the Chasqui, just like the difference in shield cost makes a ton of difference. It means you're going to have like 25% or a lot more of these than you will Chasquis when you do a rush. It also doesn't deny you the ability to use the scout, so that also comes into play. Yeah. You guys might, like, some people don't really understand why people like these, but I just suggest try it out. Like, build a barracks, build a settler, build a barracks in that new city you found with that settler, and then build nothing but Jaguars until you have like 8 or 10, and then just rush the AI. And I guarantee on any difficulty, like less than demigod, you should be able to like take out a few cities and carve out like a little empire for yourself. So yeah, better at defending than the spearman due to defensive bombard. Yeah, and better at attacking obviously than the archer. Or sorry, not better, but like you don't have to escort this unit with spearmen when you do your archer rush. So yeah, it just provides a lot of versatility. Like, you don't have to worry about army composition, like balance between spearmen and archers. Nope, just all bowmen. The biggest bonus here, like I said, you can include more archers in your stacks for your attacks, since you don't have to escort them with spears. And they are slow, sadly. One thing I really value in this list is utility, or sorry, mobility. Just because it allows your units to be in more places at once, and then also allows them to attack before the AI gets like stronger on defense. And since the Bowman lack that, even though they're a good rushing unit, I can't give them too high of a spot. The Enkidu Warrior. One word to describe this unit, and it's utility. You often won't even fight with these things, but they're still really, really useful, because normally throughout the game you're going to need a lot of spearmen, and you're going to invest some shields into those spearmen. With the Enkidu Warrior, you invest less shields, so you'll have more shields at the start of the game to build anything you want. So that makes them a really versatile unit, because you could pour that into anything else. You can pour it into offensive units, into wonders, to expansion, granaries, growth, anything you want. If you do fight with them, they're extremely, extremely cost effective. Like, for example, let's say you have 5 Enkidu Warriors against 5 Gallic Swordsmen. The realistic, optimistic situation for the Gallic Swordsman, let's say they're the attacking player, is that they kill 3 Enkidu Warriors, retreat against another, and then die to the 5th. So in that situation, that player has lost 40 shields, whereas the player with the Enkidu Warrior, who lost 3 units, has only lost 30 shields. That's just how incredibly cost-effective they are. Still, it's hard to give these guys such a high rank because they don't actually do much on their own. They won't conquer the world for you. I don't have too much to say about the samurai. Defense is useful in the medieval era, like I mentioned, on knights, but knights already have a fairly strong defense stat, so it's not... and plus they have the ability to retreat too, so this isn't too essential. Also only requires iron, it doesn't require horses, but it is a strong, strict upgrade on a good offensive unit, so yeah, I have to give this a pretty high ranking. The Legionary. Now, you might be wondering why I have the Legionary ahead of Samurais, but the Swiss Mercenaries ahead of Hoplites. My justification for the Swiss Mercenaries being ahead of Hoplites was that defense is better in the medieval era, but in this case, the fact that the Swordsman is so cheap is the deciding factor. Like, you'll build a lot more Legionaries than you will Samurais, just because they cost less than half as much as the Samurai, so that extra point of defense goes a lot further. You can also, because like Swordsmen are a really, really amazing base unit, I like to say that there are 4 unique units that all civilizations have access to, and those would be the Swordsman, the Cavalry, the Bomber, and the Infantry. Those are just amazing units, and they're not even unique units. So any improvement, especially a strict improvement on the Swordsman, is going to be really, really good. Yeah, you can use this as defensive units, as offensive units. They're just really strong, durable, not mobile, sadly, but I really like them. Hwacha. So these are painfully slow to use, and like I said, I really value mobility, so I can't give these a high ranking. But I can't give them a lower ranking than this because they are hands down the most cost-effective unit in the game. Like, bombers can be shot down. These things and like trebuchets, cannons cannot kill units outright because they don't have lethal land bombardment. These things, if you have a stack of them, they can just like tear through a city, and you can capture the city. It'll just be empty for you. So it means as long as you can protect these things, you will not lose any units, which makes them incredibly cost efficient. I mean, at some points you might need like an astronomically high number of them, especially on higher difficulty levels, to kill the city outright, but yeah, they're good. The one downside to them is if the enemy captures them, since the enemy can't build the Hwacha, it just gets destroyed, which means you can't recapture them. The AI is really bad at micromanaging artillery. Like, if they capture like a stack of 100 trebuchets or whatever from you, they're just gonna just send them wherever and not even escort them. So yeah, you can just really easily retake them, but that's not an option here. Tier 2. These are very strong units, extremely useful at conquering enemy land. Utility alone is not enough to reach this tier, because conquering, hands down, it wins you the game, so I value it quite highly. So the Dromon. Incredible on Archipelago maps. It's one of the most useful unique units on Cid difficulty. I saw someone play Cid difficulty always war. Like, he declared war instantly on all the enemies, and then stayed at war the entire game, and he managed to win the game with this unique unit. It's just so strong. The AI doesn't really know how to deal with naval units. I think it's because the galley is not programmed as an offensive unit. Like, the AI doesn't understand that if they just attack your Dromon, it's like kind of a favorable exchange for them. Less favorable than if you attack, because you have such a strong attack stat on the Dromon, obviously. It's useful for denying contact. You can give yourself monopoly on planting on cities, on particular islands. There's just so many good things about this unit. You can bombard enemy, really weaken them economically. But it's situational, so I can't really justify putting it any higher than this. It's like kind of useful on Pangaean continents maps as like a mobile artillery that you can use to like soften coastal cities, but yeah. Sipahi. A lot of people might want this on the top, and it does belong pretty high. It is a good unit, but one thing people don't consider is that it costs 100 shields, which is a lot. This is the only unit that can really deal with a rifleman on its own. It completely melts through anything before riflemen, like muskets even, pikes and spearmen certainly. And it's useful even after into the Industrial Age, which is something that the cavalry kind of struggles with unless it's being supported by artillery. It would get outclassed by the infantry, if not for its mobility. So basically, you can just move around and not take unfavorable trades. And you can also retreat if you're attacking infantry. So yeah. The War Chariot. A lot of people rank this really low, which is really misguided in my opinion, because this is just like an archer on wheels, and archer rushes are very, very strong. Like, this is 20 shields. This is ridiculous. You can conquer like half of your continent before anyone even has swordsman or anything. It's great for conquering early game. Don't think of it as a buffed chariot. Think of it as a cheaper horseman. Or like a faster archer, maybe. So yeah, it's somewhat situational due to terrain, but in most situations, you're going to be able to rush somebody with this. And if you rush somebody with this, you're probably going to be effective just because it's so cost effective. Like, imagine instead of like rushing with 10 horsemen, you can rush with 15 horsemen. That's the difference that the cheapness of the war chariots make. Immortals. So people really like this unit. The swordsman is already a strong unit, as I mentioned, and this is a strict improvement to the offense of an already strong offensive unit. Generally, the way I rank it is at the bottom you have improvements to the offensive defensive units. Above that, you have improvements to the defensive units. Above that, you have improvements to the defensive offensive units, and at the top, it's improvements to the offensive units. Sorry, offensive units. That sounds weird. Anyway, this is a really great unit. The only downside to it is it's not mobile, so you can conquer the world, like you can conquer a lot with this, but like maybe not quite as much as the war chariot would, because the war chariot moves twice as fast, which is good for the war chariot, because the war chariot is useful for like it gets outclassed really quickly, whereas the immortals they stay relevant into the medieval era. So I have to give them a really high mark. One thing that helps with the lack of mobility is the fact that the Persians are industrious, so you can build a lot of roads to wherever you're trying to attack, but as I mentioned, I'm not taking into account trade synergies. Yeah, everything above this unit on the list is more mobile. This is the best unique unit that's immobile in the game. If you think it belongs higher than this, it's just because maybe it's a bias of mine. I think it's objective, but mobility is just worth a lot. Like, if you have a really strong unique unit, or a unit in general, you want it to be able to be in as many places at once. And so that's why above the Immortals we have the Ansar Warrior. So compare it to the Keshik. Keshik has 422, this is 423. As I mentioned, the extra mobility is insane. It has a weak defense, but you can like kind of position your unit around it. Like, if you have extra moves, then you have to spend less time in enemy territory before you take their cities. So the lack of defense isn't as relevant. It's still relevant, not quite as relevant. But I'd much rather have the mobility, and these things are cheaper than the knights. So yeah, this is a very strong unit. Number 5, we have the Berserk, which is a bit unconventional compared to the other units at the top of the tier, but I felt like it was worth including here. So it's very mobile due to amphibious assaults. You can just place these on boats, and your boats have 3 movements since you're seafaring, but I'm not taking that into account. They can do so many weird and unique things that no other unit can do. Like, for example, if the AI plants on a 1-tile island, you cannot kill that city. No one in the game can kill that city until the end of the Industrial Era, when you research Marines. The Berserk can kill the city. So yeah, very, very unique in what it can do. extremely useful on archipelago maps, but it's also good on continents and Pangea. They are very expensive, so use them carefully. Like, I think some people underestimate the value of the Berserk just because they don't use them right. Like, they just let them die, like, because they'll just melt on defense against swordsmen or medieval infantry or anything like that. So you have to, like, if you're using these on land, you need to escort them with a lot of pikemen, and preferably, you should just load up boats with these things and pikemen. And when you take the city, you take the Berserk out of the city, so you don't lose your Berserk. And by doing that, you can hold on to them and like stack a large number, and once you get like a critical mass, it becomes hard for the AI to really deal with them. Riders. Yeah, pretty much repeat of everything I said about the Ansar warrior, except because the Ansar warrior is an already strong unit, I think it's good to invest in things that are strong, you know. So paying the extra 10 shields to get 50% stronger defense is an upgrade, in my opinion. I mean, obviously there's an upgrade on the regular knight, but this is also better than the Ansar warrior, in my opinion. This is the ultimate conquer your continent movement unit because it's so mobile, it retreats. Yeah, it's just a great unit. The War-Elephant. So I mentioned that the developers underestimated the strength of, they overestimated the strength of mobility over mountains and stuff like that. They clearly underestimated the benefit of having +1 health, as evidenced by this unit and by the ancient cavalry that you get from the statue of Zeus. So, in the base game, these things were just 70 shields, 4-3, and didn't require any resources. And like that was the only improvement, that they didn't require iron, they don't require horses, and people were kind of underwhelmed by this. So they decided to give them +1 HP, which is a massive, massive, massive buff to this unit. And the knight is already quite a strong unit. Like, not, I wouldn't say it's like as strong as like the bomber or the cavalry or the swordsman, because it's not quite as cost efficient. It's still a really great unit, and so any improvement on this great unit is amazing. Like, imagine a knight with like 5-3-2, like just that stat line. That would be an amazing unique unit. The War-Elephant pretty much has that, because it has like plus 25% bonus to attack, because it has 25% more hit points. And it also has a 25% bonus to defense. And on top of that, it requires no resources, which is not really much of an improvement, like I mentioned, but I mean, it's something. And it's, yeah, just two amazing bonuses, and then one kind of, useful bonus. Yeah, and it's not even more expensive. Like, this thing, to be balanced, it should be 80 shields, just straight up, but it isn't. So, yeah. The tier 1 units, though. Like, I can't give the War-Elephant too high of a ranking, because it doesn't come in the ancient era. It doesn't allow you to snowball games as effectively as these last two units. And you might have seen me use these units a lot in my playthroughs, so yeah, this shouldn't surprise you. The Gallic Swordsman. These things are the tank of the ancient era. If you protect them carefully, you can just like build up that critical mass, and it's really hard to lose them if you manage them carefully. The Swordsman is already a great unit. Like I mentioned, +1 speed on them is a dream. Sadly, these do cost +10 shields, but that's really, really, really worth it. So the retreat function is incredibly valuable for protecting these guys and keeping them alive, which makes them, in a lot of ways, stronger than the Immortals and the Legionaries, because these are stronger on both attack and defense, because in both of those situations, you have the ability to retreat. They can't be built after feudalism, which is really annoying, because a lot of the time you'll just conquer so hard that you'll accidentally take the Great Library, and then you'll get feudalism without really meaning to. And they're not really as upgradable as horse units, although you don't really need to upgrade them. They have synergy with slaving, like hurry production when playing on accelerated production, because slaving yields 20 shields, and these things cost 20 shields in accelerated production, because it's half cost for every unit. And I really debated this. These are like, on some level, they are worse than the Mounted Warrior. Because like I said, defense is not important in the ancient era. I'd much rather have the lower cost. Like, it's worth playing an extra 10 shields relative to the Swordsman, but I'd much rather have this unit, I'd usually rather have this unit, like paying the cheaper cost in exchange for one less defense. So 1 defense is really bottom of the barrel, especially the way combat works in Civ 3. It's based on like the ratio of the attack and defense stat, and not like the absolute number. So like the difference between 8 attack and 4 defense is the same as between 2 attack and 1 defense. So 1 defense is really, really low, but these things, they run away. Like, that's their defensive unit, or defensive strategy. They run away. And the fact is that these things are so cheap that it doesn't really matter if you lose these. Like, if you do lose them, that's perfectly fine. They're so cheap, you can build more of them. You'll lose a few, that's fine. Like I said, they can retreat. And yeah, you can build these for longer. And they're also very upgradable. Like, one common strategy that you can use is you can build a bunch of chariots, then you research horseback riding, and then you upgrade all those chariots to mounted warriors. Very cheap, very effective. And then when you're done with them, they upgrade to knights, which is not true of the Gallic Swordsman. So yeah, just based on the fact that these things are so cheap and so upgradable, I have to give these the best unit in the game. You will conquer so hard in the early game if you like focus on military strategy around these things. So yeah, definitely consider using these units if you haven't taken them into account. So here's the completed tier list, in case anyone wanted to skip to the end of the video and just like see where I put everything. Earlier positions is higher rank. Yeah, and let me know what you guys think of my rankings and what's your favorite unique unit. Like, if you have like any unconventional strategies that might change my opinion on these rankings, be sure to let me know in the comments. Thanks.